What we get is what we like, the democratic regulated capital state, the creation of Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and FDR, where government regulates the economy to mitigate the problems for workers, and the creation of the welfare safety net like we got in the New Deal, right? Those are the reforms that we see as the best way to take care of the problems of industrialization and yet retain free market capitalism as much as possible. And we retain the liberal democratic state where we believe in democracy still. These three groups are going to fight it out in World War II. It's going to start with Hitler and the communists fighting. And we're going to stay on the sideline. This starts in the Spanish-American War. I know these aren't IDs for you, but I'm just giving you this presentation because I want you to know it. In Spain, they have a fight where they've got fascists controlling the blue areas and they've got communists controlling the red areas, and a civil war breaks out. Adolf Hitler sends troops and airplanes to Spain to help Franco and the fascists. Stalin sends support to the communists. And so basically in Spain we have the first movement of the war between these two forces. Adolf Hitler is arming Germany, and he's arming it with all the new technology he can think of, and he wants to try out his new planes that can drop bombs now. Remember World War I when they had these little wooden planes with canvas on them and they're like shooting at each other and having dog fights? Now they have the idea of pretty long-range bombers. And he is able to have German aviators bomb communist-held territory. Now, Pablo Picasso, have you heard of him? Pablo Picasso, major Spanish painter. He paints this after the bombing of a city, a communist-held city in Spain. This is supposed to be his... Afterwards, the city's exploded. There's a random killing of everybody in the city by these bombs. Now, the Western democracies are horrified by this, right? Wow, here comes war again, and now it's more evil. The thought of civilians being bombed, the Western democracies say that's just evil, right? But what will we do before the war is over, right? We're going to kill, hundreds of thousands of Germans. Unfortunately, as war and technology changes with each war, we're at first horrified by it, but then we usually end up having to adopt the same methods to win the war. And then by the Cold War, we've all got nuclear weapons pointed at each other, and we accept that civilian populations are legitimate targets of war. We no longer like that idea. All right, now how does America respond to this? And you finally get an idea for you. It's called the America First. We're sitting over here in America, and we're watching what's going on in Europe, and we're going, uh-oh, what's coming back? War. And if you see what I've got written up here, we are moving from independent internationalism into a period which we call isolationism. That is, we want to isolate ourselves from the world. This is the America First Committee. And it's an association that's trying to help promote something. And what it's trying to promote is that America deal, they don't want to say we're isolationists, that doesn't sound very good. We're America first. Let's not worry about the rest of the world. Let's just worry about America. Charles Lindbergh, who had become famous as an aviator in 1927, I think, when he flew from New York to Paris, he's one of the most famous spokespersons for this. He's going around the country, large gatherings saying, let's stay out of Europe. Let's not make sure we don't get into another war. That popular sentiment of a lot of Americans gets put into law with the Nye Commission and the Neutrality Acts, your next ID. The Nye Commission is a congressional investigative body. The purpose of the commission is to discover how we got into World War I. And let me ask you, what does that suggest about our opinion of having gotten into World War I? If we're wanting to know why we did. What do you think, Chelsea? There was no point, and it might have been a what? It was a mistake. So there's a fundamental belief by 1935 that we made a mistake in even getting into that war. And what the Nye Commission discovers is that Wall Street, interest in England, had influence on Wilson's Secretary of State, and that big business was able to, and American banks took an interest in England winning, and we loaned them a lot of money, and we had a dog in the fight. And then Woodrow Wilson was able to use German submarine warfare and the deaths of Americans on British ships as a reason to begin to lambast the Germans and begin to take sides. And then it just went from there. So what the Nye Commission does is it recommends to Congress some laws that we might create to prevent a replay of that, because we assume war is coming back to Europe. So these are going to be, they're going to pass laws in 35, they're going to beef them up in 36 and 37. The purpose of these laws are to keep America out of a war and to keep our president from being able to lead us into the war by taking sides. So, the first round says that in the event of a war breaking out between countries, we're not going to trade with those. We're not going to take our ships and go there and bring them food or let them order things and us bring them. Also, any Americans that travel to a war zone do so at their own risk, right? So that the president can now say, look at this, what's happening, and begin to take sides like we did after Lusitania. Also, since we had made a lot of loans to Great Britain during the war and to France, and we needed them to win that war, our bankers needed them to win that war, we say that the United States banks cannot make loans to countries that are at war. Then in 37, they get one last law. They're trying to think, are there any loopholes we've left here for the president or something to bring us into a war? They say that if anybody wants at war who wants to buy things from America, you've got to bring your own ship and you got to pay cash for it and you got to take it out of here. We're not going to be involved in it at all. And then they ban Americans from traveling on ships of nations that are at war. That way the president can't begin to say, I'm protecting Americans, right? So we think we've got it wrapped up, and it reflects America's interest in staying out of what we think will be another war in Europe. This is going to be very hard for FDR to deal with, because he's going to believe that we do need to end up getting into the war in 1939 and 1940, but he is locked up. And he's going to have to figure out, like Houdini, if you know that escape artist, how to get out from under the Neutrality Acts. And you'll have some ideas on that eventually. All right, and I want to talk about the Evian Conference next. And the Evian Conference has to do with Nazi race ideology. And this doesn't come out of nowhere. At the end of the 19th century, Europeans, as they began to dominate other parts of the world and subject other peoples to their domination and treat them very poorly in the result of it, they come up with philosophies about the subhuman nature of non-Europeans. And this is a French essay. It's called Essay on the Inequality of the Human Races. And within this, they have this idea that the Anglos are the supreme master race, and that all the other groups are, they depict them rather poorly, are subhuman. They don't have the right qualities. And we have the arrival of eugenics sciences, which think that the qualities within these other races that make them inferior are passed from generation to generation. Now, those ideas become part of America too. We've got it going on too. Remember the Virginia law that forbade, and a lot of states began to forbid a marriage between European whites and African Americans in America, right? And they started talking about race hygiene, race purity. And we also began to try to getting rid of epilepsy and other diseases that were genetic. We would sterilize people, right? Remember the 1926 sterilization laws. So this is not coming out of anywhere. Now, what Adolf Hitler does is he says that we, these Aryans, are the master race, and the other ones are Untermenschen. They are underman or subhuman. And what he wants to do is to create, he wants to bring the nation together under race ideology. Now, let me give you a theoretical idea that I should like you to think about. Socialism stresses conflict between classes within a nation, right? That the poor German worker is being exploited by the German owner of a company. That creates friction within the country. Racism brings all classes together under the banner of race superiority. He sees emphasizing race as a way to unite Germany. And he needs a scapegoat for this. Who does he look to as a scapegoat to rally around Germans, around the race idea? Jews. there are 200,000 Jews in Germany out of a population of 25 million. But there's always been in Europe anti-Jewish sentiments going back to the medieval period, because Jews were allowed to make loans and charge interest. And during the medieval period of European history, Christians weren't allowed to do that. The church thought that charging interest was usury, the sin of usury. And so Jews went into banking. And so if you ever wanted to if a little village got too far in debt, they were never going to get out of it. The way they declared bankruptcy, basically, was to attack the Jews and send them out of the town. And all of a sudden you don't owe anybody any money. But so there's always been a tradition in Europe of going after Jews. So he revitalizes that. And the Nazis saddle the Jewish population in Germany with everything that's gone wrong. They say that why did we lose World War I? Because Jewish officers, Jewish civil servants, they were behind it. They sold us out. And Jewish bankers are the scourge of the earth. And so what he does now is he introduces the Nuremberg laws. And the Nuremberg laws, this says, nicht für Juden. Not for Jews. What is this? It's a park bench? There you go. And it say nicht für Juden. What does that mean? Jews can't sit here. Right? And now they start doing, Jews can't sit on, Jews have to have their own section of a bus. Jews have to sit in their own section in a theater. What does that sound like? What? American Jim Crow laws? In the South? Absolutely. He takes this whole ideology from the South in the United States and brings it to Germany. He also now forbids Germans and Jews from intermarrying. And he has this whole race ideology. And here's the interesting thing. You're not Jewish because you go to synagogue. You're Jewish because of your race. And he's going to say that it doesn't matter if people are Jewish and practice Judaism. It's what's in them makes them evil. And therefore, he's going to bar all Jews from public service, from judges, from teachers, if you're a lawyer, you can no longer have Aryan clients. If you are a doctor, you can no longer have Aryan clients. Germans can't marry Jews. Now, this leads to Jews being very threatened in this situation, and they begin to try to leave Germany. But they've got a problem. They can't go anywhere. It's 1935-36. There's a worldwide depression. In America, we've got immigration restrictions now as of 1926. They can't come here. They can't go to France. France has got 25-30% unemployment. They don't want a bunch of Jews coming in who aren't, because Adolf Hitler won't let anyone leave with their property. He says any money you got over however many generations you've been in Germany, you got from evil machinations. So Jews end up going over into Austria to hide because there's a large Jewish population in Vienna. But then in 1938, Nazis have arisen in Austria, and they invite Germany to come in and take over Austria and annex it, kind of like Russia is annexing Crimea today. So this leads to a Jewish refugee crisis. And Jews are fleeing Nazi-controlled territory, and they don't care about immigration laws. This is a report in England. It says German Jews pouring into this country. They're pouring into France. This says, the way stateless Jews from Germany are pouring in from every port of this country is becoming an outrage. I intend to enforce the law to the fullest. So rather than thinking, wow, we need to help these people who are being attacked by their government, we're going to round them up and send them back. So this leads to a crisis. The League of Nations tries to work with Adolf Hitler, but Germany has taken themselves out of the League of Nations. They will not speak to the League of Nations. This leads to the Evian Conference. This is the Evian committee that gets formed after the conference. FDR is under pressure from American Jews who have been reading Nazi ideology, and they understand that there are some really crazy Nazis who are talking about killing all the Jews of Europe in a final solution. There's already this talk beginning to emerge. And so American Jews plead to President Roosevelt to suspend the laws and let these Jews come here as refugees, claiming some kind of political status. But Roosevelt's got a problem. In the southern part of the Democratic, so Jews are important in the northern part because they're non-Anglo ethnic whites who've come into the Democratic Party under the New Deal coalition because they can't go in the Republican Party. But in the South, the Democrats they don't like Jews, do they, right? They don't like Catholics either. And so the idea of being able to, he's going to irritate one part of his party if he takes care of the other part of the party. So what he calls for instead is an international conference to be held in France, Evian, France. The word Evian water, Evian water comes from this resort area. We are the ones behind it. We use our diplomatic corps to get all these countries. And what countries are going to come? Countries that have German refugees in these big holding pens. The United States is there. And then we invite 12 Latin American countries. Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Chile. And now the Latin American countries are like, why are we invited? This is weird. They get there. And it becomes clear during this conference the Europeans have Jews they don't want. America won't take them. And they're hoping that Latin and South America will take them. So when the conference is over, the Latin American ambassadors are like, hey, thanks for the food, that was great. But then they go to the telegraph office and they telegraph back to Argentina, you've got to pass immigration restrictions tomorrow because Jews are coming. And not only the 200,000 Jews in Germany, but there's talk as fascism is moving into Poland and Ukraine and Estonia and Latvia. There's millions of Jews there, and those governments are talking about wanting to get rid of their Jews too. We're going to be flooded with Jews. And this is actually a cartoon from 1939. And it's got our famous Statue of Liberty about when we took with pride the idea that we were accepting the world's poor, hungry, and homeless and giving them an opportunity. And this down here has a Jewish refugee ship. We're turning them back. Now what happens to those Jews during World War II? They get annihilated. And then after the war we start thinking, gee whiz, maybe we should have taken them. And so the result of that is something called political refugees. Have you heard of political refugees? Those are people who come to America and say, in my home country, I'm being targeted by my government in a way that is not proper. And so guess what we have to do in America today? If somebody gets here and can show that they're being targeted, what do? What is it? We take them, right? So that's how we got there. If you ever wonder how we got there, this is how we got there. Our failure to act on behalf of the German Jews and European Jews during the interwar period is what leads us to that.